Welcome, Miss Lauren.
Welcome. I'm so happy to be here. It's such an honor. Longtime listener and viewer and longtime fan of Kimberly. So
Oh,
I'm very happy. Thank you.
oh my gosh, it's such a treat. And I was trying to think, is this three? Is this episode three with you?
I remember doing one about
Me
travel.
too.
I don't know if there was, and that was a long time ago. That was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe how long you've been in this like podcast space, but yeah, I don't know if there was another one. But I'm honored to, whether it's two or three, I'm so excited.
I'm so excited too. And yeah, I think there was another, but don't quote me. And I will do the
Huh.
research and I will put a link in the show notes, listeners. So
Oh my
never
gosh, that's
fear.
lame if I can't remember. Goodness.
So tell me, you have a new book, which is so exciting. And I'm just going to
Do. Yeah.
read the cover and listeners. So I am getting a copy, but it's arriving today after the recording, sadly. So I can't hold it up and show your gorgeous cover. But so
Oh,
tell me, what
I have a
led you to
copy.
write like Be Well, Do Good? And I'm just going to go through the subtitle because it's lovely and it really sums it up beautifully. Self-care and renewal for nonprofit professionals and other do-gooders, which I know listeners you relate to. So tell me the background
The
here, honey.
to the inspirational do-gooder. Not only inspiration on do-gooding, but just on writing a book. You were, I think, my first pal who actually did this and maybe planted the seed that it was possible. Although honestly, I have a lot of friends and colleagues who talk about their dream of writing a book and they've always wanted to write a book. It was not on my, it wasn't so much on my radar. Like I wasn't sure that I had a book in me. And I just kept hearing more and more in my professional world in the nonprofit sector and frankly in my personal life as well about nonprofit professionals being overworked, overstressed, burned out, leaving their jobs, tremendous churn in nonprofit workplaces among professionals. So people just leaving. And that really impacts the quality of the work. And I'll step back in a minute and talk about my background that I consult with many nonprofits. So, and I realized that over the years, I had done a ton of writing and blogging and speaking about this topic without having in mind someday I'll put it in a book, but I'm just so personally connected and committed to this notion of self-care and wellness and well workplaces. I really believe it's not all on the individual employee, it's on the workplace as well to make this possible and to make it realistic for people. So when I realized how much content I had on this, I thought I need to put this out into the world. So I looked back at a lot of things that I had written over the years and that I wrote some new things to kind of wrap it up and hopefully add some new ideas to the conversation. Again, not just about individuals and what they can do for themselves, but what their workplaces can do for them. And I also am, very committed in my own work when I do trainings and things with nonprofits, very committed to making it interactive, not just a lecture, don't just barf a bunch of words all over people, that people learn when they can participate. So I knew that when I put this together in a book, I wanted to have some worksheets, checklists, things that people could do to make it personal, and that I wanted it to look beautiful. That, I'm a creative person. I love to create and craft and all of that. And I knew I didn't just want it to be words on a page. I wanted to make it, visually stimulating also. So yeah, that's how it kind of came together. So people have asked me how long it took. And I like to say, well, it took about 4 months, but it took about 5 or 10 years, of living this life and thinking about these issues.
Well, what I love about it is it's like thinking, okay, what are the various things that I talk about, I teach, or I consult on? Well, how do I package that and kind of pull it together? And I love what you said too. I mean, people love downloadables and, the ability to like fill out checklists and things like that. So it makes it more interactive. And this idea of a well workplace versus like, oh, I need to be a well employee. I mean, that's important, but also like we need a well environment. And so let's dive in. So, I think your first chapter is really, the title of it is so good. It's like, this work isn't easy. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about what you mean by that and what you recommend for listeners.
Well, let me start by saying, a lot of what I write is about not-for-profit workplaces, but I do think that it is applicable to any workplace and to anyone who is passionate about their work and is passionate about making things better. And for some people, you don't have to work at a nonprofit organization to be doing work that improves people's lives or improves communities. So let me start by saying that. In answer to your question, I'm going to talk about something I read recently that really stuck with me. I'd never heard this term before, but it clicked. I was reading an article on LinkedIn about, and this is the author's term, passion exploitation. That there is this practice in in the nonprofit world, and other places as well, other workplaces, where it's like, well, you're passionate about this, so you're passionate about this, so we can overwork you. You're passionate about this, so you can be understaffed on your project. You can be underpaid. You are expected to work, weekends, work overtime, not take vacations, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that I think makes passion exploitation so insidious is there's this notion of, if you speak up or if you complain, it's like you're not committed. And that is an incredibly unfair expectation. So when I say this work is hard, it's not only all of those conditions, but a lot of people that are working in the nonprofit space are also working with and in really challenging, difficult environments and communities. You're hearing really tough stories all the time. You're seeing heartbreaking things. You are working on problems that need to be solved. So there's that layer of stress and anxiety and trauma on top of just the difficulties of, low pay, high unrealistic expectations, crazy hours, all the rest of it.
Yeah, what an interesting phrase, passion exploitation. I mean, it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
that totally makes sense. And it's kind of like, well, are you not dedicated? Do you not care about the animals? Do you know what I
Right,
mean? So it's like, yeah, really
right. When I
interesting.
used to work, I've been consulting for, it's going to be 19 years this spring, but when I used to work full time in several nonprofits, I left at like 5:30 every day. And people used to remark about it. Like, how are you leaving so early? What does that mean? I have one friend who said she used to ask herself, what would Lauren do? Like when she was really overstressed and felt like she needed to stay till 9 o'clock at night. And no one told me to do that. I've just always operated that way. And part of it is that like I had friendly relationships at work, but I didn't spend, an hour BSing around the water cooler. Like I did my work. And there's a price to pay for that as well, frankly, in terms of relationships, promotion, all those things. But if it meant that I could, leave at 5:30 or 6 or whatever and have the rest of my life, that's what I wanted. Another story that comes to mind that I shared with someone recently is in one of the nonprofit workplaces where I worked before I started consulting. I used to like spread things out all over my desk during the day. And before I left at the end of the day, I just, straightened it up, put everything away. Like I liked coming into a clean desk in the morning. And someone said to me, you shouldn't do that because people are going to think that you're not busy. And so I would leave an intentionally messy desk. And let's just take a step back. What is going on in the American workplace where we have to be performative and prove that we are, harried and stressed out and too busy to clean off our desk. Something is wrong in that scenario. And I know that wasn't just my workplace. That's plenty of workplaces. That's the culture.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy, right? Because it's like, I mean, I look around, my desk is like filled with things from lip balm to eczema medicine to
I
like
mean, these are the
tea,
essentials.
glasses. Anyway, but yeah, isn't that funny? Because, if you look at somebody who has a super clean desk, I mean, yeah, you may think like, oh, they haven't been here in a while. Or you may be like, oh my gosh, they're so organized. What a wonderful asset to the team. So it's just funny, isn't
Exactly.
it?
You have to prove your worth by proving how overwhelmed you are.
Totally, by how messy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk words of the years. You have this
Hmm.
as a potential plural. And so I'm curious to talk to us a little bit about that and why that is important.
So I started doing a word of the year a few years ago, as something to I don't like to call it a goal, but it's more like something to guide my thoughts, especially when the thoughts sort of felt like they were going off the rails a little bit. Maybe this comes from my meditation background, where in certain meditation traditions, you have a mantra, and the idea is you can sort of gently bring your mind back to the mantra when it starts to wander, because it does wander. That's human nature. So at the end of each year, the beginning of a new year, I guess is more accurate, would sort of think about what I've struggled with, where I wanted to improve my life, my thought process, whatever. And then I would have this word of the year that I would come back to, either just thinking about it or journaling about it or whatever. So, for example, a couple of years ago, it was abundance, because I felt like I was operating from a scarcity mentality, of this mentality of not having enough, instead of look at everything I have and abundance is flowing towards me. It's just a mindset shift. And so it was a way of allowing myself to notice when I was falling into that scarcity mindset. Or my most recent one, which has been really meaningful, which was all of 2022, was gratitude. Reminding myself to be grateful for what I have and to share my gratitude with the people I care about. So I've had this gratitude practice where every day I write about gratitude. Well, let's be honest, is it every day? Some days I miss, but trying every day to write three things that I'm grateful for. But not, somebody taught me, you don't just write three things. Don't just say I'm grateful for my cat, sunshine, and chocolate, but really to talk about it. So I'm grateful for my cat because she gives me so much comfort. When I'm feeling down, she'll sit in my lap and I can pet her, and it just, revives me. Like, you have to sort of talk about it a little bit. That has been life changing. That has been a life changing practice. This year, I have a lot of kind of uncertainties and transitions coming up. And I am the kind of person whose natural inclination is to go to the worst case scenario. Like, what if it doesn't work out or whatever? So my words this year are what if, and really trying to get in the practice of saying, oh, what if it does work out? What if I have enough money? What if I have enough time? What if this transition is terrific? So again, it's sort of a reminder to myself and a way to course correct. Maybe that's the way I'd say it.
Yeah, words of the year are so important. And you know what's funny, Lauren? I'm still like, what is mine for 2023? I still haven't figured it out. It's like I put so much pressure. It has to be the right word. But I've like, I'm kind of flowing with different things. But it is, I think it is a way almost even to help with decision making. Like,
Yeah.
well, does having this like fourth piece of pumpkin pie align with my word of the year that is like health or whatever. I've had nourishment, spaciousness, beauty, like all sorts of them, so it's like I'm still trying to suss mine out. So
I love spaciousness. I think I
yeah.
remember you talking about that. That's such a good one. And there's so many ways to activate that in your life, or even just notice it, or notice when you don't have it. I love that one.
Yeah. I mean, Washington Post even did, I don't know if you saw it, but they even did a whole piece on, choosing a word of the year. And I think they called it
Did
a
they?
nudge word.
Oh, I love that. I have to look that up. That's very cool. But I'm sorry you feel it is pressure to like, oh my gosh, what's it going to be?
Yeah,
Maybe
what
your
is
word
it?
of the year, maybe your word of the year is no pressure. Maybe those are your words of the year.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe that's telling you something, you know?
maybe I'm toying with a lot of them, but nothing is just set. You know how when you hear it, when you write, you're like, ah, that's it. So
Yeah, when you sort of suck in your breath. Yeah.
totally, you're like, so one other chapter that I really thought was so important, and I think listeners will resonate with, is this idea of doing less and gaining more, right?
Mm.
We love keeping ourselves busy, we love checking things off, and yet how do we do less and gain more?
Well, here's the trick. No, I don't, it's a work in progress. And I feel like I always have to say a disclaimer with this book too. Like, I am not the master, of wellness or, these are all things I'm working towards and striving towards. Um, I mean, it's no secret that we have a very more is more kind of culture. And I'm part of that too. I mean, it's funny, you were talking about how full your desk is. I think one thing you and I have in common, because I have been to the Pink Palace, is we are not minimalists, we are maximalists. I like to have a lot of stuff around me, right? So that's my version of more. Um, but I certainly have found that um, when I pack my schedule with a lot of things to do and tasks and goals and accomplishments, it is a coping mechanism. Like, busyness is a distraction. Yeah. Um, and that if I allow myself some spaciousness, there's that word, that when I do have things that I really need to do or want to do, it works better. It's a deeper, more meaningful engagement with whatever it is I do have to do. So I think it's a worthwhile question to ask oneself. Is this necessary? Do I really need to do it? And it's something that I work on with clients as well. If they want to take on a new project, if they want to pursue a new funding opportunity, in a lot of workplaces, there's this notion of we have to do more, we have to be bigger, we have to, et cetera, et cetera. But there's an opportunity cost for every more, right? What is it going to cost you to take on this new project? What aren't you going to be able to do as you take on this new project? And that is also specific to fundraising, which is my specialization in the nonprofit world. Nonprofits are always looking for the new donors. Where do you find new donors, new people to add? But all of the research, and this is an incontrovertible fact, all of the research documents that it is more cost effective and brings in more money to take care of the donors you have than to bring in new donors, right? And it's sort of a metaphor for life, like take care of what you have and you're going to gain more than by sort of this desperate grasping for the new. It's something I wrote about in the book that somebody actually posted, did a screenshot of this page of the book and put it on LinkedIn. And it was where I talk about kind of less desperate grasping, more more calm and more care for the things we have rather than always trying to have more.
Oh my gosh, I have so much to say about everything you've said. And,
I want to hear it. Lay it on me.
well, what's interesting is they say that also, even with like, say, your mailing list, right? Or, whatever it is, the people who buy your courses, it's like, take care of the ones you have
Yes.
versus like, because, like it sounds like the same thing with donors. I mean, they're more likely to continue to support than gaining new ones. And not that we don't want to welcome and be accommodating and supportive and encourage new, but it's like, how do you take care of the people who are already there supporting you, which is so interesting, and that totally makes sense with
Mm-hmm.
regard to donors. The
Yeah.
other piece is minimalism. And it's so funny because it's like, as you said that, I'm like, well, I kind of think of myself as a minimalist. And I look around and I'm like, what the hell? Who am I trying to fool? Do you know what I mean? But it's like, I do live in
But why
such
do we have to be minimalist? We
I
like
know.
our Doodads.
But it's funny. And too, when you said, things, I was like, oh, but it's mainly consumables, right? But I'm like, is a book a consumable? Because that's what I buy a lot of. And, it's just, I was just thinking, it's like, because I've been beating myself up a little this year of just like, why do you keep buying things? But really, I mean, I've been getting a lot of books this year. And then, it's just like things that I need to replenish, right? Like more tea. I mean, we always need more tea, or
Obviously.
whatever it might be. I mean, obviously. But it's funny,
Yeah.
I really try to, and I don't know about you, because it's not like doodads, or trinkets, or what do you even call them? Tchotchkes. But it's more
Tchotchkes. Very nice,
tchotchkes.
Kimberly.
Thank you. That's Yiddish, right?
Yes,
Look
good
at
job.
me.
Look at you, multicultural.
Multicultural. But yeah, it's like, consumables, I feel like I have less guilt around, but really this desk is filled with like consumables. I'm like, really, I could clean it up a little bit. So anyway, that was just a random thought as you were speaking
But I think you
about
and I are also
minimalism.
both like experiences over things kind of people. You can be
Yes.
both, you know?
Totally experiences over things. Experiences and consumables are the things that I just kind of, keep emphasizing for myself, and I let myself like indulge in, right? Versus,
Sure.
I don't know what a tchotchke is, but
This
So
is going to be
anyway,
your word of the year, permission. Wouldn't that
permission.
be an interesting one for anybody?
I do
Permission.
like permission. I have
Give
I have
yourself permission.
I have
Who are
pondered
you
that.
asking permission from? And do you need to ask them permission? Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to
Well,
think
and
about
you
that.
just triggered two other things that I wanted to comment on. One was the busy. So let me put a pin in that. I'll come back. But the
Mm,
permission, oh, this is what it was. As you said, like, oh, well, when you say yes to something, it's like, what else? What are you going to take off your plate? And I think it's
mhm.
just always good to keep in mind when you say yes to something, whatever it is, you're saying no to something else, right? So
Right.
it's like, okay, what is the priority? What is how I want to spend my time and energy? But the busy thing, Lauren, I picture myself on P Street in your apartment. How many years ago was that? Like
A
15?
few. Yeah.
Along, and we would occasionally like have tea or whatever at your place. And I remember you asking like, how are you? And I'm like, busy. I'm like so crazy busy, right? That was always my statement before.
Mhm.
And I remember you saying, yeah, I mean, like, right? I mean, aren't we always? And I remember that I mean, that stuck with me. And I thought, well,
Mm.
no, you're not always. And I was like, yes, always. And why? So it's so interesting. And I even picked up a book that somebody had gifted me last year this morning. It's called The Art of Rest. And and again, it's like your gizmo.
It's all good. I
He
give
just like
Gizmo permission to say what he needs to say.
make any kind of
Gizmo's
noise he
like, I'm
wants.
busy too.
He's like, I have needs. I need consumables. But it's like, it's just, I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to keep in mind of like, why do we keep ourselves so busy? And particularly within an organization, within our work, or, what have you. And the reminder, I think, particularly as we head into midlife, it's
Oy.
like, I don't think we have the patience for that anymore, right? So it's
Mm-mm.
just interesting as we think about this whole idea, which I love, again, just going back to the title of your book, right? It's like, how do we be well and do good? And you cannot do good if you are not well.
I agree. Can I share one other
Yes.
resource with your listeners slash viewers? I have been proselytizing about this and I'm getting nothing from it. I don't know this author. I've never met her. I'm just very inspired. And I blogged about it recently. So if anyone wants to learn more, it's on my blog. But I was listening to a podcast, Glennon Doyle's podcast, and there was this woman on it who has started this thing called the Nap Ministry, nap, like sleeping nap. And it is not about, everyone needs fluffy pillows and scented candles. It's about rest as a form of resistance, as resisting a system that uses our bodies as productivity. And her rationale, I don't want to misstate it too much, but her mission is also a lot about how Black bodies have systemically been used. But this notion of rest is radical is really resonating with me.
I really like that. And yes, I love the Nat Ministry. So definitely
Oh, you
listeners
know it.
follow.
Oh, you
Of
know it.
course I
Okay.
know it. Oh my gosh.
Oh, of
She's
course you do.
amazing.
She's amazing.
She
Let's have
is.
a conversation with her.
I know, right? That would be amazing. But you know what I really like kind of about her message and what you're relaying from it is this idea of, it is resistance, right? It's doing things different than how like we see productivity. And just to give an example for myself, like I used to in the yoga studio days, I would come home from teaching or taking class. I mean, I might get home at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then I would work until like 1 o'clock handling all these emails. Like, honey, you could not get me to do that now. I finish clients maybe 7:30 at night. I come home, maybe I'll handle a tiny thing if I need to. Then I'm like, shut this thing down. And I go to bed
Mm.
at like 8:30, 9:30. But it's like
That sounds like heaven, actually.
it's kind of heaven. But like, who has time for that? Do you know what I mean? Yes, I have way too many emails that I'm just will not get answered. And you know what? It's okay. And I think it does come back to this permission piece and also pushing against like society's expectations. We are not workhorses, right? We
Right.
are we are human beings, and so
Yeah.
yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
we're not machines. We're not machines. And some of that look comes with age. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I did the same thing when I was 25 and I'm 52 now. So I'm not doing that. I think that the expectations are different when you're younger and your like biorhythms and energy are different. Sometimes I do work late at night, but I have taken a nap in the middle of the day and I'm self-employed and I can do that and I'm okay with that. But yeah, you got to listen to your own rhythms, I think.
Yeah, and they sure do shift in midlife, honey.
Lord have mercy. Oh
Well, I
my
love two more questions, but the second to last one is what do you hope readers will take away from this book? Like, what are you hoping is maybe the biggest nugget or the overarching premise with it?
Maybe it's just because we just talked about it, but this notion of permission, giving yourself permission to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Um, and a thing that my book doesn't resolve it, but I hope that it asks the question that wellness shouldn't just be additive. In other words, I think one thing I write about in the book is, is saying, Friday yoga isn't enough, right? Like wellness shouldn't feel like a to-do list. I have to do my twice a day meditation. I have to do my yoga. I have to drink my water. I have to go for my walk. I have to do my crap. My wellness is crafting. Like I have to do my crafting. Then it gets to be overwhelming. There has to be some sort of systemic shift and realignment about what is expected of us and what is expected of ourselves. So I hope that particularly for people who work in nonprofits, that they can read the book, take some of the ideas that I put forth there. And again, this also applies to all workplaces, and ask questions and push back on policies that make it hard or impossible for us to be our best selves in the workplace. Push back on having to answer your work phone at 10 o'clock at night, push back on having to work through a weekend, push back on not having opportunities to reconnect with the mission of the work. It's not enough for a nonprofit to say, oh, well, if you want to feel connected, go visit our tutoring center or our homeless shelter. Not enough. The leaders have to make that a normative practice that we go do this. That's just one example. So I'm sorry, it's a long answer to your short question, but I hope people will get ideas of things that they can do for themselves. Micro steps is one way I've talked about it, but also ideas for how to shift the culture at their workplace.
I think that's so big. And again, to emphasize, this is not just for nonprofit workers, even though I know that's the lens that it was written from. So,
Mhm.
listeners, I think so many people can benefit from this. And one of the things that I noted is a thriving nonprofit workforce elevates the common good, right? So, a thriving workforce or a thriving work from home situation, I mean, whatever it is, it's like can make a bigger difference, on a much larger perspective. So thank you for writing this book.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love talking about it. I love talking to you and Gizmo.
And Gizmo, because he's got lots to say. Now, my last question for you, Miss Lauren, which you know because you have listened to the podcast, but the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. So, how do you find tranquility in your busy day? You've got a daughter, you've got a cat, you've got a business. You have a
Yeah.
home?
It's a lot. As I said earlier, I am certainly not the master. What is that? Do as I say, not as I do. It's a work in progress. Um, one thing that I will mention is crafting, and it's something that I've started putting in my bio that I'm a COVID crafter, obsessive crafter, whatever you want to call it. Whether it's crocheting, which I do a lot of, or printmaking, or lettering, like fancy lettering, drawing. Actually, the first time I got into that was with a workshop with someone that you hosted. I can't remember her name. But there is something about particularly crocheting that like the rhythm of it just calms me and soothes me. And whether it's that or something else, kind of entering the flow state that I achieve when I'm doing something creative, when I'm crafting, it just, brings my blood pressure down. And I think frankly, it also reminds me of my talents. And I'm not saying I'm like the most fabulous, drawer or crocheter in the world, but I think it's okay to sort of recognize in yourself, hey, I can create something of beauty. I can do this. I mean, even my planter, I'm looking back there, like I was like, oh, I have to craft this. So I'm gonna like cut up, ribbons and baubles, and I'm gonna put it on another piece of fabric and tie it around. I just love that, taking the everyday and trying to make it look special. So that's my biggest tranquility tool. Can I ask you that question? Or I mean, you have so many. Do you have a favorite like this week?
Well, yes, you can. And let me just say, as you were talking about this, it made me think of, do you remember our crochet date at Starbucks like
I a
15 years
thousand
ago?
percent remember it. Every time I cast on, I remember it because I was teaching you how to cast, like get the yarn on the
Honey,
thing. I was like, make a
honey.
pretzel. It's like a pretzel.
I'm like, I don't understand. I remember I wanted to learn granny squares. I was like, I'm going to
Right.
learn granny squares. My mom taught me,
Mhm.
in her minivan while my dad was driving, going to take me to the airport. Then I forgot everything, so I worked with you. I have it all in a cabinet, and it makes me so sad. But it's like, sometimes you're kind of like, do my neurons not quite work that way? Or, I think all this stuff takes practice, but it's
Yeah.
like a pretzel. I mean, I can't even. Lauren, it's like, it was so hard, so hard.
Oh my gosh, that's stuff. And that wasn't even our regular Starbucks. Listeners, we
Yes,
set up
right.
an office at this other Starbucks. That's a whole nother
It's a
story.
whole other story, which neither one of them are Starbucks anymore. They're
Wait,
both,
that both of them are gone? Oh my gosh. What is the apocalypse we're entering when Starbucks are closing?
yeah,
What does that mean?
I know, right? Oh my gosh,
Oh,
so funny. But for me, gosh, I mean, it's been such a hard year. It's like, I mean, just like the start of the year, not like a full calendar year. Thank goodness. But it's like, I guess my big things are, I mean, journaling still, of course,
mhm.
ballet.
Oh
Ballet is
yeah.
quite helpful. And tea always helps. Reading really helps. And also,
Mhm.
even this weekend, like I'm looking at my planner in front of me, and I've got two engagements, so it's like really light. One is going to watch a
Mm.
ballet. Okay, that's not hard. Do you know what I mean?
That's so much work,
I can
right?
do it. I can do it. Right. And then the other thing is, I'm hosting like a guest for the coterie, right? A guest event.
Mm.
And then I'll probably do ballet tomorrow and tonight. Okay. But that's it. Right. And so typically my weekends are just, they used to be quite loaded with things. And now I'm just like, I don't have the energy for that. So I think also, and think about tranquility in every day, it's like adjusting one's schedule to align with one's energy, I think is so, so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a good point. And I love the notion of whether it's ballet or yoga or whatever it is you do, just like getting out of my head and into my body is so helpful. And I think the physicality of crafts, frankly, does that for me too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're gonna
That's
we're gonna try again with you. We're gonna have a granny square session.
we
That is
will
funny.
we will conquer it. I mean, I got it at one point, but you know how it's like you get something, like I need to do things, like I need repetition,
You're a
right?
learn by doing person. Yeah.
Yes. And
Hmm.
anyway, and there was like space between my mom's teaching and yours. And then I think I just was like, I don't know if you remember what mine looked like. Do you remember like the
I
pieces?
think I blocked it out. Yeah, I don't remember.
I think you should. And I actually think I still have them. So anyway, it's a little traumatic. I'm gonna a little
I didn't mean to
self-soothing.
bring up a trauma. You know what? If it's not for you, it's not for you. But we'll get together and I'll crochet and you'll, I don't know, do a pirouette and
It's
it'll
all
be
right.
great. I'm going to crochet you a tutu. That's going to be my next
Oh
project.
my God, that would be amazing.
I'm always looking for a project.
And Lauren, my last thing is it's just so fun to interview you about a book because I don't know, I'm sure you remember, but you did the introduction at the Hip Tranquil Chick book launch event, and it's
I
just
am
so
still
sweet.
honored by that. I 1,000% remember it. That was such a special night. And you did show me the way that, oh, you can write a book, like you can do this is a thing. We were saying before, you're such an early adopter. You're such a I don't want to say trendsetter, but like you forge a path and that inspires other people. But I absolutely remember that night. It was really, really special. I'm looking at that book right now. I still look at it from time to time.
Oh, and you know what is fun? I don't know if you remember this, but you read like my first draft of like first chapter or something. And I remember I think I had said, oh, I wanted to say winding path, and I wrote windy, and you did, you like marked it out and we're like, I think you mean winding. Just like, I don't know if you remember that. It's funny that I
I,
remember like, oh
I
shoot.
actually do now that you say it. And I feel like the cover of the book was inspired by that Starbucks. There was like a high counter and we would sit at the counter and work. I don't know if any of this is going to make it into the podcast or not, but one thing I was just thinking about as I was reflecting on those days when we would work side by side at that Starbucks is this is how long ago it was. They used to charge for Wi-Fi.
Oh
And I
yes.
remember thinking, why are they charging us? It's just turning on the modem and they're all one of these days they're not going to charge for this anymore.
You were right.
Oh yeah, I'm such a futurist.
It's
So
funny. That rings a vague bell, but isn't it funny? It's like you forget some things that are like, oh, that was horrible. That was for horrible times when I had to pay for Wi-Fi. It's like,
what's that?
oh,
All right. Well, the
oh.
first of many conversations in the new year, I
Yes.
hope.
Yes. So good to see you and congrats on your new book. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.